What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So Suga Sean O'Malley, not just a flash in the pan, brash guy with a crazy haircut. This guy is now the champion of the world. He did it by finishing the best bantamweight of all time in Aljamain Sterling with just an absolutely beautiful TKO. First and foremost, credit to you because you called this. Not only did you pick Sean to win, you said he was going to finish Aljo. I thought you were crazy. I'm happy to sit here and eat crow today. But what did you make of the performance?
Well, I had to go with the underdog in this, and a lot of people were looking at Suga Sean as the guy that really didn't have a chance, but, he's such a big star, and he knows how to deal with these high-pressure moments that maybe something crazy can happen. But going into this fight week and this fight night, it almost felt like everybody was like, oh, we've already read this book before. We know how it's going to end, but we'll still tune in because Suga's very entertaining. Man, he shocked the world. Aljamain Sterling is one of the best bantamweights that the world has ever seen, and a lot of people have him up there as number one. And for Suga to go in there and just have the perfect game plan, everything down to the tempo of which the first round was fought and the way the mind games were playing going into the second round, was just perfect. And I really got to give a lot of credit to Tim Welch. That guy is a mastermind, and to be so young in this sport and have such a good head on his shoulders and a good coaching mind, he deserves a lot of praise. But of course, the night belongs to Suga Sean O'Malley. And I think, when you build a star up like that, you see something special. Dana White knows a star when he sees him. He saw something in Suga Sean up to like 7 years ago, and I can't believe we're talking about him being now the best bantamweight on the planet.
Yeah, it really is incredible, and credit to Tim Welch because he is a great coach, and to be such a young guy and recognize that that's his path in life. Because a lot of young fighters, they, when they're coming up, their only goal and motivation is getting into the UFC, working your way up the ranks and getting that belt.
Exactly.
But sometimes that's not always the path for everybody. And I know it was Sean's night, and that is the path for him. But Tim recognized pretty early on that, hey, I've got something in my ability to articulate and teach things. And Chael Sonnen said even when he was on the mats with him back in the day when he was an even younger guy, he was showing the older guys stuff and explaining things in such a way that he was almost wise beyond his years. And so I love to see a story of loyalty because the two of them, they looked like babies when they first started out in this broke in the apartment in Montana. The pictures have surfaced. So it's a really cool story, but I want to talk specifically about the knockout itself because a lot of people are comparing it to Conor McGregor's knockout of Jose Aldo. Although it didn't happen in the first 13 seconds of the fight, I think in a lot of ways it was actually cleaner than McGregor's knockout because he roped Sterling into doing exactly what he wanted him to do, which was to try to rush in on him. That tempo in the first round was a little bit slower. I think Aljo had the mindset going into the second round, okay, I need to make something happen here. I need to push the action, push the envelope, and that's what set that knockout up. And the reason I say it was cleaner than Conor's is Conor actually got touched by Jose Aldo when he deployed that fight-ending power.
Right.
Sean was beautifully in range but out of range. If you look at how close Aljo's punch was to Sean's face, and that's the secret to landing counter-punching power, is having your opponent just far away enough to not hit you, but just close enough to where you can make him pay for missing. And that's exactly what he did. Sean did not get touched in that sequence. He was patient when he got Aljo on the ground. He selected his shots. This was high-level mixed martial arts on display. He's not just a guy with a rainbow haircut and face tattoos. He's one of the best mixed martial artists in the game.
Yeah, it's crazy to say it, but it's absolutely true in my opinion. Sean O'Malley is one of the top 3 best strikers that the UFC has on its roster. I mean, I've got Izzy right there, and then maybe you could throw in a Pereira or somebody else that's just as dynamic. But, I mean, he's right there with the best in the world. And when you talk about counter-striking, it's such a difficult game to play because you have to have a deep understanding of range. And Suga Sean really does have that. Now, when you go against a really good wrestler, obviously their goal is to get you up against the cage or get you on the ground as quickly as possible. But everybody knows that in MMA, you can't just wrestle. You can't just go grab a leg. You can't just, shoot a single, shoot a double, or try to get an ankle pick. You've got to go in there and throw your hands up to sort of get their guard up or get their attention up in the air towards your hands, and then you can shoot down, change your level, and then grab a hold of them. So Suga Sean knew exactly how Aljamain wanted to enter for the takedown. He needed to throw a couple strikes. A lot of wrestlers will do that. They'll throw their 1-2 because that's usually the most, utilized combination in all of combat sports. Just throw a couple 1-2s, and if you're boxing, step back. But if you're in wrestling or if you're in MMA, throw that 1-2 and then change levels and get in. And just to see him right at the end of Aljamain's punches was a thing of beauty. Like, you got to go back and watch that thing. You could watch it 100 times. And I know that he had to do a little bit more ground and pound than Conor McGregor did, but in my opinion, that could have been stopped a bit earlier. It almost looked like he knocked Aljamain out, and then a couple of those, hammer fist on the bottom woke Aljamain back up, and then he was just sort of scrambling and looking to find his footing. It's always difficult, and I never like to criticize the referees that have one of the hardest jobs out there, which is to try to make the fighters safe, but also let the fight go the right amount of distance and everything. It's a very difficult thing for them to navigate, but I think that fight could have been called a little bit earlier, but either way you look at it, that shot was vicious. He threw it with perfect precision, and Suga Sean O'Malley is not just one of these guys that has accumulative volume power, or he can knock you out after a bunch of rounds and just sort of piecing you up time after time. He's got that one-shot KO power, and he almost had a walk-off KO to get that belt. I mean, he started to walk off a little bit, and then he's like, I don't know, Aljamain's pretty durable. Let me go in there and, bounce his head off the canvas a couple of times. So I was really impressed with how Suga finished the night.
Yeah, it was very, very impressive indeed. And he did finish the night by saying he wants to fight again in December, and he wants the opponent to be Chito Vera. He highly contests the 1L on his record. It does come at the hands of Vera. There was a lot to unpack as far as that fight is concerned. Sean was winning that fight up until he got injured, and then, ends up getting finished on the ground by Vera. Vera says that he set that up from the beginning. He was looking to damage the leg, get Sean to the ground, and finish him there. So obviously it's a tale of two stories, and both men see that fight very different. But there's a chance for history to be made again, and let those two guys get in there and settle the score once and for all. Let's see if it was a fluke the first time around, or if Chito really does actually have Sean's number. I think after last night, Sean's going to be hard to beat for anybody at 135, and I think he probably would have the upper hand against Vera. But there's some marketing material there. There's some bad blood there. There's a backstory, and Sean took no damage last night, so he wants to be active. I say get him in there in December. Conor McGregor is still saying he's fighting in December. I don't know if USADA has something else to say about that or what the deal is there. It's still kind of unclear, but could you imagine a card where McGregor's the headliner and Suga Sean is the co-main event against Chito Vera?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And, Suga Sean will be defending his title in December, it looks like. And I think Chito Vera, if he didn't have previous, issues with Suga Sean, and he didn't have that controversial win over Sean, which the Sugar State Athletic Commission has determined that actually wasn't a loss, and now he's still an 18-0 undefeated fighter, now world champion. But Chito Vera likely wouldn't have gotten a title shot off of his performance that he gave last night. I understand that he got his hand raised, and Pedro Munoz is a tough night out for anybody, but it wasn't that type of performance, that blockbuster knockout that you need to get yourself a title shot. And with all the people at bantamweight, it's really difficult to make yourself stick out unless you're finishing people. But when you've got the now champion calling your name out, it does make sense to see where the UFC can take this fight. And I think Chito Vera understands the promotional side of this. He knows how Suga likes to promote fights and push things forward and kind of work outside of the octagon to make this thing as big a magnitude fight as he can possibly make it. Chito's a bit of a character himself, Suga's already taken shots at the way he dresses. He said he looks ridiculous. He dresses stupid. His hair's ugly and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Bad tattoos, whatever it is. So I do think there's a lot of back and forth and pre-fight antics that would take place in that fight. But I do have to say that if there's anybody that I think Sean would have a good chance at winning against in his first title defense, it would be Chito Vera. I know Chito got his hand raised in that first fight, but before that leg kick that shut down Suga's leg happened, Suga was kind of piecing Chito Vera up in that whole fight, and that round did look like it was going to go in the direction of Suga Sean. But, anything can happen in this sport. It's all about damage and durability, and his durability was up in question for a little while, and Chito was able to land a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's the fight game. Anything can happen.
That's right.
And talking about making fun of each other's outfits, there would certainly be some interesting outfits and or haircuts going into those press conferences. So it's something I'd really like to see. You have Umar Nurmagomedov coming up. You have Merab now. Sterling's probably going to have to take some time off, reassess what he wants to do. It's only fair to his best friend Merab to kind of let him make his little run to the top and maybe even avenge his best friend's loss. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Aljo. I do think the UFC gets Sean back in there in December. The UFC obviously is going to be looking for Sean to have the belt around his waist as long as possible because of the marketability. So I think the likely opponent will be Chito Vera, but time will tell.
Yeah, last little thing. This is the realest sport in the world, and there's the realest athletes in here. Aljamain Sterling deserves a little bit of credit to go in there and talk to Joe Rogan after the fight, after just getting knocked out. And he says, we've heard a lot about you going to 145. What do you think? And he goes, well, if Suga Sean can do that to me, imagine what Volkanovski can do to me. So I don't really know where Aljamain Sterling's going to go next. I'd like to see him go up to 45 because I think there's some fun matchups there. But it does seem to me, as of last night, he now has some business that he needs to go take care of at 35.
Yep, I would agree.